Okay guys, listen. I'm gonna blow your freaking mind. This, right here, this Super Nintendo controller with a built-in screen, it can play all sorts of retro games, from Game Boy up to Super Nintendo, and it comes preloaded with over 10,000 games. But lots of retro handhelds can do that, so what's the big deal? Well, this is the big deal. Guess what this costs? You'll never guess. You saw the price in the video title. Okay, I guess I ruined the surprise there. Yeah, it's 20 bucks. 20 freaking bucks. Surely it can't actually be good, right? Oh baby, wait till you see what this thing can do. Hello, hi there, I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. $20 doesn't get you much in today's economy. That's like one visit to the fancy coffee shop to get your daily venti double iced caramel macchiato with almond milk, 2 pumps of vanilla syrup, 2 pumps of caramel syrup, light ice caramel drizzle on top with a piece of toasted sesame almond biscotti. Or a single visit to the convenience store for a pack of Miller Lite and a bag of Funyuns. I'm just saying that $20 doesn't get you much these days. And while, yes, there are some legitimate practical things you could be spending your $20 on, you should probably spend it on retro games instead. This is the Data Frog SF2000, a dirt cheap retro handheld that is less than $20, and it can actually play retro games. And not just like those garbage cheap handhelds that only have a bunch of crappy C-list NES games. This thing can play real games. I'm talking about Game Boy, Gameboy Colour, Gameboy Advance, NES, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Arcade, and Super Nintendo. It's not perfect, let's be real here, but for $20, like, holy crap, this thing is actually decent. Decent. Let's address the elephant in the room. Data Frog is the best name for a company ever. We all agree on that, I think. Fun fact, frogs are my favorite animal. So this is like 2 of my favorite things together. Data and frogs together at last. This is their SF2000 retro gaming handheld, and today I just want to show you this thing and why I think it's actually amazing for the price. Now, we need to keep the price in mind. I'm going to say it a few times in this video, it's all relative to the price. If this thing was like 40 or 50 bucks, it would be a lot harder to recommend it, but it's actually less than $20 on AliExpress, including shipping. That's where I got this one, and it only took like a week and a bit for it to arrive to be here in Canada. You can find it other places too, like I'll include a few links in the description below. Before we dive in, I'm just going to point out that there has been an update to the operating system since it launched. And the updated OS has much better performance than the old stock OS in lots of games. However, it's super easy to upgrade to the new OS. It's just a matter of downloading the image and flashing it to an SD card, either the SD card that came with the device or whatever SD card you have lying around. Data Frog even have a quick, easy video tutorial for you to follow. I'll include a link in the description below. And the image even comes preloaded with all the games, so you don't have anything to worry about futzing around with ROM files or anything. I flashed the updated OS to a 32GB micro SD card that I had lying around, and it was super quick and easy. If you're gonna get one of these things, or if you have one, I highly recommend doing this. I'll also mention that there's no custom firmware yet. However, I think it's very likely that we will get some custom firmware at some point. In fact, there's news that an SDK for the CPU has been identified, which will allow for custom firmware development. And also there's this handy website that's collected all the info about this thing, all the updates, and a few tweaks and tips and tricks that you can use to customize the system on the device if you're in the mood to tinker. I'll include a link to this information below as well. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's see. What kind of device are we going to get for our $20? Well, let's start at the beginning with the unboxing and the tour. In the box, there's a few things. We get a word paper with some stuff on it. I don't know what it says. I don't care. And the device itself, which we'll get to in a minute. And then we get the world's cheapest piece of crap micro SD card reader. And then we get a USB-C cable for charging. And we get an AV cable for connecting this to a TV, which does work. Apparently for an extra $5, you can get this thing bundled with an extra Super Nintendo controller, so you can have multiplayer on the TV. I kind of wish I went for that bundle because that sounds sweet. As for the device itself, well, it looks like a Super Nintendo controller, obviously. Not just the shape, but the colorization. They have that gray and purple vibe of the good old Super Nintendo. The buttons are fine, the D-pad is fine, the shoulders are okay, start and select out here, and it even has a perfectly serviceable, usable joystick. My first impression of getting this thing into my hands is that it felt much better than a $20 handheld should feel. On the back, we have a battery bay that holds a 15,000 milliamp hour battery. It's actually raised up here. Can you see that? It's thicker at the top. This is decently ergonomic. It feels like an intentional design for comfort, and it's nice to hold. It looks like there's two speaker grills, but there's actually only one speaker, so one of these is a fake. On the bottom, we have a power switch, USB-C charging hole, a micro SD card hole, a headphone hole, and a volume wheel. Let's turn it on and get a look at that screen. Now, it's not an amazing screen, but for the price, it's actually really good. I've seen more expensive devices with worse screens than this. It's a 3-inch IPS screen with a resolution of 320 by 240, which is enough, you know? It's not great, but for most of the games that you're playing on here, that's actually totally fine. It's bright enough to play in the day, and it has great viewing angles. Not bad at all. Let's go through the system quick. There's an options area that has a few useful things. A favorites section where you can see all the games that you've marked as favorite. History, search, key mapping where you can change the controls for each of the systems, change the language, switch the TV out function from NTSC to PAL, and view the user game list if you add your own ROMs. Each system has a few pre-selected games that you can't change, but you can press start to go into the games list. In here, you can browse through the games one at a time or page through them, and there's even box art or screenshots for the games. And you could press the Y button to mark a game as a favorite. The games start up quick and generally work fine. One thing I'll mention, I don't know if you can see in the video, but we do have some screen tearing, which is kind of expected on these dirt cheap devices. It's not terribly noticeable most of the time though. When you're in a game, you could press start and select to bring up the in-game options. Here, we don't have much, but we do have the ability to save and load your state with 4 save slots, which is one thing that's pretty much a requirement for me to enjoy a retro handheld in general. So at least we get the save states. I'll get this out of the way right now. Not every game that's on here is going to run perfectly. Some of the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance games have subpar performance, but the performance across the board is way better since I updated to the latest firmware. NES works great. By great, I mean fine. Not 100% perfect. A little bit of slowdown here and there, and a little bit of rare audio weirdness, but good enough considering the asking price. Really, it's fine. NES is a totally fun experience on here. There are handhelds at this price that could barely handle even NES, so at the very least we get that. Game Boy is good too. They have a smoothing filter on the screen and it's not the original ratio and you can't change that, but that's fine, you know. The games work and they're fun to play. For the most part, everything I tried worked fine except for one game. My favorite Game Boy game, Burger Time, did not boot up for whatever reason, so it loses points from me for that. Game Boy Color is good too. These games all worked fine as far as I could tell, and these look really good on this screen at this size. You know, I've always kind of ignored Game Boy Color, but lately I've actually really enjoyed trying more of these games on these handhelds. I keep finding games that I'm having fun playing or that kind of pushed the Game Boy Color hardware. I find them fascinating. This is a great Game Boy Color device. It has a ton of them on here too. As for arcade games, well, there's about 200 games. Not every arcade game is on here, but lots of them are. And the ones that are on here run really well as far as I could tell. Even some of the more advanced games like CPS games are on here, including 2 of my favorite arcade games, the Dungeons & Dragons arcade games. There's a little bit of everything in here. A ton of fighting games. Yeah, I found it took me a while to get the hang of this D-pad. It's not the best for doing special moves, but I figured it out in the end. Although I generally prefer playing with a joystick on this device for most arcade games. Super Nintendo is a bit hit or miss. Here's the thing with Super Nintendo. There's a glitch with this device where the first time that you load up a Super Nintendo game, it doesn't work well. but then you exit the game and start it up again and it works much better. Even still, not every Super Nintendo game is going to run perfectly. You'll notice some dropped frames and some audio glitches, but most of them will run with nearly full speed, and at least they'll be playable for the most part. And for like non-action games, RPG games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy, you won't even notice that they're not running perfectly. Game Boy Advance is a bit disappointing at times. Again, not every game will have perfect performance. Lots of games will, though. I'd actually say that the majority will be perfect, while a good percentage will be playable, and a small percentage will not be good enough to be enjoyable. But even in my testing, I fired up a ton of games and found that I generally really enjoyed playing Game Boy Advance on here. There were way more hits than misses, so to speak. And I was really just impressed that we get so many Game Boy Advance games to play this well on a sub $200 device. Yeah, you gotta keep that price tag in mind, right? However, I saved the best for last. Sega Genesis is amazing on this device. This thing actually has a Sega Master System emulator on here too, but no ROMs, so you'll have to add those yourself. I don't care about Master System, but I do love me some Sega Genesis. The other high-end systems like Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance aren't perfect, but Sega, for the most part, is perfect. The games were all silky smooth, and they looked great on this screen. I know it looks like a Super Nintendo controller, but trust me, this is the portable Sega Genesis that the childhood version of TechDweeb always dreamed of. I dare say that the Sega game collection and the performance on this device alone is worth the $20 price tag. I mean, we all waste money on lots of stuff. Let's be real. How many of us blow $20 on some garbage fast food because we're too lazy to bake some potatoes? Or throw $20 at a single Steam game that we play for 5 minutes and then never touch again? Here, for $20, you get a huge collection of retro games, most of which play great with just enough options and features that make it convenient on a device that has good build quality, okay controls, a surprisingly good screen. There are a few downsides, of course. The not so great mono speaker, not every game will work well, some graphical issues and screen tearing in some games, and some occasional audio glitches. But in my opinion, for the price, this is an insane value. You can have a lot of fun with this thing. For like a newcomer to the hobby, someone who's just sort of curious about what this whole retro handheld hobby is all about, this is a no-brainer. For someone looking for a cheap gift, this is definitely cheap and definitely user-friendly, so I'd say it'd be a great gift. And even for an enthusiast, it's good to have a beater device on hand. A dirt cheap handheld to toss in your man purse and not have to worry about putting it in a case or leave it in your car or whatever. Something to take camping or to the beach or rock climbing. Something so cheap that you don't care much about it, so you'll actually use it in those situations where you're not able to be super careful with your delicate, expensive gaming device. In fact, if I might be so bold, this handheld gets to the heart of what retro gaming in 2023 should be about. Just playing the games and having fun, not fussing about performance and adjusting 400 settings and emulators, not worrying about your precious expensive tech toy, and most importantly, not spending hundreds of dollars to play freaking Darkwing Duck. Well, that's it. That's the Data Frog SF2000. If you want one on the cheap, check out the links below. And of course, hit the thumbs up button if you like the video. Or don't if you didn't. Oh, and you should stop by my Discord server. There's lots of fun nerds over there to hang out with, including yours truly. Well, that's it for me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.